Hello and welcome back. We've been going through the Bible. We started at creation where we saw a picture of what God wanted life to look like. We saw all of those things fall apart. God called Abraham and made a one-sided covenant with Abraham, a promise where God said, I will give you descendants, I'll give you land for those descendants to live in, and all nations of the earth will be blessed through you. Abraham didn't have any role in that promise. It was just God's promise to Abraham, period. Well, Abraham had Isaac, Isaac had Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Israel ended up having 12 sons. Those sons grew into tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel, and they lived in Egypt. And eventually, they were taken as slaves, beaten, oppressed, abused. And finally, God sent Moses to deliver them out of the hand of Egypt and the Egyptians. And Moses led them out of Egypt into the desert. God made a covenant with all of the people. And this covenant was more of a regular covenant where the people had a role and God had a role. God gave the law, the Torah, and he said, do these things, don't do these other things. And my role is that I will bless you beyond anything you can imagine. Your role is just to keep the covenant, to obey these commandments, these laws. And the people blew it right from the beginning. Before Moses was even down from the mountain with these tablets, the people were already breaking the covenant. Well, the people ended up living in the desert for 40 years, and another generation rose up, and they went into that land that God promised to Abraham. The Canaanites lived in the land. The Canaanites were so completely steeped in sin that God said they have to go. They are beyond any hope of repentance, and if I don't destroy them, if I don't judge them, then they will end up corrupting the people around them, and that's going to spread and spread. So God said, I'm using you, Israel, to go in and be my instrument of judgment against the Canaanites. And the people went in and almost fully obeyed God, but that almost became troublesome. They ended up leaving a lot of the Canaanites in the land, and they adopted their culture. They started worshiping their gods. They started becoming just like these corrupt people that God was judging. And God eventually just kind of said, all right, if you're going to worship these other gods, let me take my hands off, and let's see how you do here. So God would let an enemy come in and oppress the people, and the people would be desperate, and they'd cry out to the Lord. The Lord would raise up a judge in the sense of somebody who's going to judge the enemies of God. And the judge did the job. The people turn back to the Lord. Things are good. They get comfortable. They settle down. They start worshiping the other gods again. And we go through this cycle over and over again. And we're nearing the end of this cycle. And this is where we left off. And I'm going to pick up with the last of the judges that's mentioned in the book of Judges. There are 2 more judges after this, but this is the last one. His name is Samson. So, like many of the other stories in the Bible, there was a woman who was barren, desperately wanted to have a child, and the angel of the Lord appeared and said, behold, you are barren, you have borne no children, but you shall conceive and give birth to a son. And this woman was ecstatic, right? Completely rejoicing at this news. Everything's going to be wonderful. Therefore, the angel of the Lord says, be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing, for behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. And this was great news. Now, the Nazarite thing, right, that's taken from the book of Numbers. That's part of the Torah. And Torah can mean the law that God gave, or in a different context, it can mean any of the first 5 books, or the first 5 books as a whole. And the book of Numbers is there. And there's this little clause here about a Nazarite. A Nazarite is somebody who wants to set themselves apart for the Lord for a certain amount of time. It doesn't have to be necessarily a long period of time, but for most of these people it would be. Part of it is cutting their hair and letting their hair grow back, and that takes a little while. But it's not always like a lifelong thing. Some of the things here in number 6, The person who wants to make a special vow to dedicate himself to the Lord will abstain from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar, and shall drink no grape juice, no fresh grapes, no dried grapes or raisins, right? No raisin bran, no raisin bread, no grape juice, just nothing that has anything to do with grapes. When you start this vow, you will cut your hair, and then all the days of the vow, you let your hair grow, so your hair ends up getting longer. You shall not go near a dead body. Some translations say a dead person, but body is a more accurate translation, and that would include animals, cattle, whatever. So don't go near any dead body, even if it's your own family. And if you're walking next to somebody and the person drops dead, and as they're dying, they fall into you, and you end up accidentally touching a dead body, then you pretty much have to go see a priest and cut your hair and start over. So, a couple other odds and ends there in the rules, but these things, it's sort of an outward sign of a certain dedication to the Lord. It's not like it makes people better than other people. It's just kind of saying like, hey, I want to do something out of the ordinary, to sort of dedicate myself to the Lord for a certain period of time. Well, Samson, this child that was born to this couple, he was to be a Nazirite from birth, and even really from conception, right? The angel of the Lord said, "Don't," to the mother, "don't drink any wine," because the wine would actually go, through the umbilical cord and get into the baby. So, right from conception, this child would be a Nazirite. Well, Samson was born, he grew up, and he went to the Philistine territory. And the Philistines were one of the bitter enemies of Israel, and at this point, they were oppressing the people. The Philistines were in charge. They were kind of calling the shots. They determined what people could and could not do in Israel. We like to think that the Philistines were this little pocket of bad people, and the Israelites were this big, strong country now, but it's just not like that. The Philistines were really strong, and they called the shots. So Samson went down to Timnah, a city in the Philistine area. He saw a woman, thought she was kind of hot, came back, told his father, "Get me that woman as a wife." And both parents were saying, "What's wrong with you? Can't you just find, a nice woman from our own people?" And he said, "No, I want her. Go get her." Well, we get a little side note here saying his mother and father did not know that this thing was from the Lord. And the Lord was seeking an occasion against the Philistines. The Lord wanted to use Samson as a judge against the Philistines. So they went down to Timnah, and they're going to go find this girl. And on the way down, a lion, the family, they don't always travel together. You generally travel in big groups. Well, Samson was sort of on his own for a little while, which is unusual. But while he was alone, a lion attacked, just came out of nowhere. And when a lion attacks, you pretty much either outrun the person next to you or you die. That's how you survive a lion attack. Well, Samson, this lion attacked him, and he just kind of turned around. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he just tore that lion into pieces. And there's a little note here saying he tore the lion as one tears a young goat. I don't know what it's like to tear a young goat. I've never tried it. But apparently it's a lot easier than lion. But Samson did this, and he caught up with his family. He didn't say anything about it to anybody, because, all in a day's business, right? So they go down there, they talk to the woman, and she looked good to Samson. Well, when he returned to take her as his wife, he turned aside to look at the carcass, right? He's like, "Hey, I remember last time we came down here, that lion attacked me and I killed it. I want to go see the carcass." And there were bees in the carcass, and the bees were making honey. So he just went over with his hand, scooped up some honey. And apparently the bees just didn't bother him, like getting stung however many times there. Just scooped up some honey and, put it in a little jar and went on his way. Well, remember the law of the Nazirite vow. A Nazirite shall not touch any dead body. He just defiled, he broke that part of the Nazirite vow. He doesn't take this vow seriously, and that's what this whole thing is pointing to. Well, they went on there, and Samson decides to play a little game with the all the guys that were there at the celebration. Um, Samson loved killing Philistines, and he didn't mind the women so much though. It was just the Philistine men that he wanted to kill. The women, he was pretty fond of them. So he there were 30 guys, and he said, "Let me tell you a riddle, and if you can guess the answer to this riddle, I'll give you." And they, exchange. It was clothing in this case, 30 nice outfits, and if you don't guess it, you all give me 30 nice outfits, 30 changes of clothes. And there's no way anybody could guess this. He said to them, "Out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet." Well, it had to do with the lion attacking him. He tore the lion, and then, the bees made this nest in there with honey. So out of the eater, the lion, came something to eat, honey. And out of the strong, the lion, came something sweet, the honey. Well, nobody can possibly know that. He didn't tell anybody. Well, the people, the men, gathered together with his new wife, the Philistine girl, and they convince her to betray Samson, and she does. She puts on a really cute, beautiful pout and says, "You didn't even tell me the answer to this," and she's crying. "How can you say you love me if you're not letting me in on your secret?" And well, he tells her. She sneaks out, tells the guys. They answer the riddle successfully. Well, Samson knows nobody but her knew the answer to this riddle. There's no way anybody could know except her. And he knows exactly what happened. So he says, "All right, I am, I've sworn this, we made a deal. I'll agree to my end of the deal. I owe you 30 changes of clothing." So he went to another Philistine city and killed 30 men, took their clothing, and then went back up to the other city and gave them these changes of clothes. Nice way to make friends here. But he was so bitter with his wife, he just kind of left. Well, the girl's father, thought that Samson just had it with her and just permanently left her, divorced her. And so he actually arranged another marriage to some other Philistine guy. Well, Samson got lonely and he missed his wife. She was cute and stuff after all, and went down to be with her. And he went up he kind of went in the house on his way up to the bedroom. The father says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he says, "I'm going to be with my wife." And he says, "She's not here. I thought you hated her, so I married her to somebody else." Well, he was furious with this. So he went out and got a whole bunch of foxes and got the foxes together, somehow managed to get all these foxes into one little area, penned them in, 2 by 2, tied their tails together with a torch tied in the middle, and then let the foxes run free. Hundreds of these foxes with torches in their tails. They're upset, for good reason, and they started running through all these fields, and the torches are lit, so they're setting all the fields on fire. The farther the foxes ran, the more fire there was, which scared the foxes, so they ran farther and set more fields on fire. And he burnt up this huge area. Well, the Philistines came out saying, "Who did this?" And they find out Samson did it, and it was because his father-in-law betrayed him and gave his wife away to somebody else. And they said, "Well, we need to kill them for what they did to Samson." So they went and killed this family. Samson found out that they killed his father-in-law and the family, and he went and started killing Philistines. Right? So then the Philistines retaliated. They had just like a huge army, and this just kept escalating more and more and more. The army lines up. The people of Judah know that they can't fight the Philistines successfully. Last time they tried, it was under King Saul, who scratch that one, not there yet. But they know they can't handle this battle. They can't take care of this Philistine army. They'll get slaughtered. So 3,000 men from Judah come down to Samson, and they say, "What are you doing to us? You're going to get us all killed." And Samson, "I'm sorry, but we have to give you over to the Philistines." And they start binding him with ropes. Samson says, listen, promise me that you won't kill me. And they say, we won't kill you, but we're going to bind you and hand you over to the Philistines so that they don't kill us all. And he said, that's fine, just as long as you don't kill me, whatever. So they bind him with rope real tight, take him, carry him over to the Philistines. The Philistines are glad. And before they start to kill Samson, he just pops the ropes off him like they're nothing, breaks the ropes, and starts slaughtering the Philistines. And it kills this vast number of Philistines there. Well, next, Samson went to Gaza, another Philistine city, and he saw a harlot there and went into her. Very literally, it's figurative language, but in a very literal way. When the people from Gaza were told that Samson was there, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night, but he escaped. He got out. And then at some point, he met this woman named Delilah, right, another Philistine woman. And he kept coming to see her. And the men, they wanted Samson dead. They knew they couldn't do anything about it, so they convinced Delilah to get the secret of his strength. They knew his weakness. He really had this thing for the Philistine girls. And this woman, Delilah, he was, I would say he's in love with her, but I don't know that it was really love. Crazy about her, but not sure it was really love. But Delilah starts, playing this game, tell me the secret of your strength. And Samson would make something up, and she would try the thing, and then she'd sit up and yell, oh, Samson, the Philistines are here, look out, run. And Samson would just get up and just, whatever ropes were around him, he would snap them. Whatever's trying to bind him, he would snap it. And the Philistines were there waiting to ambush him, and he would just kill them all. And this happened over and over again until finally Delilah, she turns on the tears, she's crying, the whole deal. And she convinces Samson to tell her his secret. Well, he finally says, if you cut my hair, then I'll lose my strength. And he's been saying things like this all along. But he finally says that. The woman gets him to fall asleep, and I'm not told exactly how. I have a few ideas, but she gets him to fall asleep. And while he's asleep, she cuts off his hair. She has somebody sneak over and cut his hair off. And then she starts yelling, the Philistines are here. And he wakes up and he tries to snap the ropes that are binding him, and he can't do it. And the Philistines come over and bind him. They beat him. They blind him and take him captive. Well, what happened there? The whole time he's like Samson, this great judge of Israel, is he's really supposed to be fighting the Philistines, acting as the judge, God's tool of judgment against the Philistines. And instead of really living that out, he's just too busy sleeping with these cute Philistine girls. And that's all he really seems to care about. And with Delilah in particular, he gets closer and closer and closer to just giving up this whole Nazirite vow. And he just doesn't care about this vow. It's not like a thing to him. He doesn't really seem to be following the Lord or taking this vow seriously at all. And God just finally says, all right, enough. And when he crossed that line and just said, yeah, it's my hair, if you cut my hair off, like, he knows what's going on, right? He's not a dumb guy. She keeps playing these games. He thinks he's invincible, and he falls for it. Well, at the end of Samson's life, some time went by, his hair starts to grow back, and evidently he started kind of reconsidering his view of this vow as his hair grew back. And remember, in Numbers, where we get the Nazirite vow, if you break the vow, you shave your head and start over again. Well, his head was shaved for him, and he kind of started the vow over again. And at some point here, he started praying, God, let me avenge myself against these Philistines. And they brought him into this huge tent where there were thousands of Philistines gathering for a big celebration for one of their gods. And he stood right in the center by one of the main support poles. There were two poles standing there supporting the tent. He was right in between. He said, Lord, just one last time, give me strength. And he pushed and broke these poles with his hands, and the whole tent came crashing down on everybody and killed everybody in it, including Samson. So this is a glimpse of how we're doing here. And the book of Judges doesn't stop there. He was the last of the judges to be talked about in the book of Judges. But then we get this little glimpse of the tribe of Dan, who was supposed to take some of the territory in the northern part of the Philistine country. They couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. So, and they had no place to live, and they've been wandering around trying to find some place to settle down. And finally, they went way up north to a little city that was completely unprotected, and they slaughtered everybody in that city and took the city. Then we get to chapter 19 of Judges. And here's a Levite. And remember, the Levites, they were descendants of Levi, one of the sons of Jacob or Israel. And they were the ones who would help all the priests with all the priestly duties. So priests came from the tribe of Levi. Not everybody from the tribe of Levi was a priest. You had to be descended from Aaron, who was a Levite. All right, but Levites were the ones helping the priests. They're supposed to be good, priestly type men. Well, here's this guy. I listened to a Bible teacher named Dr. Bill Creasy, and he described this guy as sort of like the Unabomber who lives in the woods. And I think that's pretty accurate here. So we get this little this little phrase that we kind of skip over real quickly, and came about in those days when there was no king in Israel. And that phrase gets repeated from here on. There was no king in Israel. And we've had some subtle and some blatant little bits of scripture that say that the Lord was supposed to be their king. Here in Judges, we find out there was no king in Israel. And it's not referring to a problem that they had that there was no human king. It referred to them acknowledging no king. They started thinking, and last session we talked about this too with Gideon, they said, Gideon, be our king. And he said, no, the Lord is our king. Well, here there was no king in Israel. The people are blaming their problems on the lack of a human king. But really the problem was God had been rejected. The Lord was supposed to be their king, and they did not acknowledge the Lord as their king. There was no king in Israel. Well, here this Levite, he had a concubine, which is sort of like a type of wife, and she played the harlot. That could mean that she cheated on him. It could mean a whole lot of other things. Whatever it was, she ended up running back to her father's house, and that's probably it. Like, he probably was such a total jerk that she left him, and that could be considered playing the harlot. She did something against him by leaving him. She went back to her father's house. Well, he ended up missing her, and I'm not sure it was her that he missed so much as what she did for him, but because, this guy's not like the upright moral man that we might want to model ourselves after, right? But he ends up wanting her back. He goes to her father's house, and they get along really well, and he's going to bring her back, but the father keeps inviting him to stay, spend the night, have meals, and he keeps saying, no, I really have to go, all right, just this time. And finally he leaves, and he's leaving in the afternoon, and it's not a long journey back, but long enough that he wouldn't make it, if he left in the afternoon, he wouldn't make it back by nightfall. They ended up staying in a city. He would not stay in the city of Jebus, which later on would become known as Jerusalem. If you remember back, when the people first went in to take the land, they took Jebus, but then the Jebusites went back in and recaptured the city and strengthened themselves, and nobody was able to take it after that. So it's still the Jebusites living in there. And this Levite, he had a servant, so he's with his servant and his concubine. The servant says, let's just stay in the city of Jebus tonight. And he says, no, not with those horrible Gentiles. No, we'll stay with somebody from our own families. And so they went into the tribe of Benjamin, and they went to a city called Gibeah, and they waited for a place to spend the night. Well, people just kind of ignored him, where normally people would be just flocking around you to try to invite you, please stay with us. The hospitality was huge. It was very, very important. Still is. And here everybody just kind of ignored him. And this one older man came up and said, please spend the night. And some negotiations, the guys ended up coming back to this older man's house. Man made them dinner, and during dinner, while they were celebrating, all the men of the city, certain worthless fellows, which in the Hebrew it's actually sons of Belial. Belial was the name of a demon Sons of Belial, worthless fellows, surrounded the house, pounding on the door. They spoke to the owner of the house, the old man, saying, "Bring out the man who came to your house, that we may have relations with him." Probably sounds familiar, right? Almost exactly what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, the man, the owner of the house, went out to them and said to them, "No, my fellows, please do not act so wickedly. This man has come into my house. Do not commit this act of folly. Here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. Please let me bring them out, that you may ravish them and do to them whatever you wish, but do not commit such an act of folly against this man." Now, hopefully, you listened to the session where we talked about Sodom and Gomorrah, because this is very widely misunderstood. Generally, what's happening is that there are understandings in the culture. When you take somebody into your house, you have an obligation to, like, basically your whole life revolves around your guests while they're in your house. You meet every one of their needs, and it's an honor and shame culture, so you gain honor by doing this. And their needs include food, shelter, sleep, whatever, and protection. And you have an obligation to protect your guests. Well, when the man says, "Take my virgin daughter," just like Lot said this about his daughters in the account of Sodom and Gomorrah, there was an understanding. Lot was saying, literally saying, "I will give you my daughters before I give you my guest." But what was understood was different. What Lot was really saying was, "This man is a guest in my house, and I have an obligation to protect him." When he said, "Take my daughters instead," it was a figure of speech implying, I would be more likely to give you my daughters than this guest, but I'm not giving you anybody, right? It wasn't literally, "Take my daughters." It wasn't literally, "I would first give you my daughters than this man." If push came to shove, the daughters would be protected, right? But it was understood in that culture what he was saying. So here, the old man goes out saying, "Look, I have a daughter, he has a concubine. Take them instead. Don't take my guest," right? In other words, I'm going to protect my guest at all cost. And there was just this understanding, cultural understanding, that he had no intention of giving up his daughter or the man's concubine. It wasn't what was being spoken. Well, in Sodom and Gomorrah, the two men that were the guests were angels who blinded everybody and ended up leaving. Here, it doesn't work out so well. So the people would not listen to the man. They understood exactly what he was saying. They would not listen to the man. So the Levite, the guest, seized his concubine and brought her out to them, basically threw her out the door, shut the door behind her, and locked it. And then the men of the city gang raped her all night until morning, and they finally let her go at the approach of dawn. So there's this cultural understanding. I have no intention of giving you the woman in your... First and foremost, as a man, your obligation is to protect your woman. When you have a guest in your house, you have a major, important obligation to protect your guest, but you must still protect your woman. That's just understood. And culturally, the old man knew that, and that's what he was doing. But the Levite just took it literally and said, "You know what? My life is worth more than hers," and threw her out the door at their mercy, and they had none, and locked the door behind her. He slept. I don't know how he could sleep, but he did. And when he woke up, he went outside and saw her just barely alive, lying there on the floor, on the ground. And he just said, "Get up, it's time to go." And at some point between that moment and the time they got back, she died. The people of the town killed her while they were abusing her all night. Well, the Levite was incensed by this. And the Levite ended up taking her dead body, literally cutting the dead body into 12 pieces, and sent one part of the body with messengers to each of the 12 tribes, with a message saying, "Here's what happened in this city. Come with me to war against this city because we need to rid ourselves of this evil," right? As though he's like this righteous thing and this horrible thing was done to him. And all the tribes got the message and said, "This is horrible. We're going to war," except Benjamin, because the city of Gibeah was in Benjamin. And the tribe of Benjamin said, "That city is our people, and we're going to protect our people." And we ended up with this civil war where 11 tribes are all at war against the tribe of Benjamin, and they slaughter the tribe of Benjamin to the point where the tribe of Benjamin is almost obliterated. They kill so many of the people of the tribe of Benjamin that there is almost nobody left. And then they have to, after the war, they feel bad because, hey, this is our brother Benjamin, and we almost killed our brother. This is our family, and what have we done? And they're kind of backpedaling there. Right? This is not a pretty scene at all, and this is one of those scenes where, when I read this to my kids, and I say, I just get here and I'm like, and some bad stuff happened. What bad stuff, Daddy? When you get older, you'll understand. The Bible's not rated PG. The Bible really shows us what sin looks like. And people say sometimes, like, to murder someone, you'd have to be demon possessed. To do something like this, you'd have to be demon possessed. But there's no mention at all of demon possession here. They were called sons of Belial, but that's not a reference to demon possession. It's showing their character. And what this is doing is just showing how horrible sin has affected the world, how horribly sin is affecting everything. The depths that humanity has sunk to. This is probably one of, if not the lowest point in the history of Israel here. And in the next session, this is the end of the book of Judges. In the next session, we'll look at the book of Ruth, it's also got some pretty challenging things in it. But Ruth is actually a glimmer of hope in an otherwise horrible, bleak time in the history of Israel. So I look forward to next week's session.